You'll never believe what was shipped to Our Lady of Grace Church in Hoboken. I'm Emily Drewby, and that story is coming up.
A big surprise about jobs. New numbers out today show employment is surging. We'll break it all down. And another round of the Shutdown, Showdown. President Trump and congressional Democrats face off at the White House to find a way to get the federal government reopened. The results are ahead. Plus, we'll have this.
I'm Tim Harfman in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, where a bakery is preparing a special loaf of bread for this Sunday's Three Kings Day. That story is coming up.
Good evening, I'm Michelle Powers. Liz Faublas is off. It was quite the surprise at a New Jersey church over Christmas when a strange package arrived in the mail. Inside, a baby Jesus statue. It disappeared decades ago, but now it's back where it belongs. Currents News' Emily Drewby has the story from Hoboken, New Jersey.
The pastor here at Our Lady of Grace in Hoboken says the church at first was startled when they received a mysterious package, but when they saw what was inside, they couldn't believe their eyes.
We received a package in the office that looked suspicious. It was crudely wrapped. It wasn't sent to a person, it's just the church, no return address.
Father Alexander Santora, the pastor at Our Lady of Grace Church, explains he called the Hoboken police about the package mailed from Florida. The bomb squad responded.
They found that it was this baby Jesus, and there's an anonymous letter typed that stated it was stolen from the church.
The letter explained the statue was stolen from the church's nativity scene in the 1930s. Generations later, the person who had it decided to send it back to its proper place, the church, writing, quote, "Knowing the story, I felt it should be returned to the rightful owner."
It was just a total surprise.
Father Santora was unaware the statue was stolen so many years ago, but today he's accepting its return in good faith. Now, almost 90 years later, the baby Jesus statue is back at the church and on display in a different nativity scene. Instead of being in a crib, it's still in the mailed box as a reminder of its mysterious past. Parishioners are thrilled to see it on display.
I was shocked when he said it. Maybe that's a good sign. Maybe we'll have peace.
Father Santora explains the returned statue demonstrates a valuable lesson.
Always do the right thing. No matter how long it takes, you can do the right thing. And I think that's a universal message.
The statue will be on display inside this Hoboken church along with their nativity scene until mid-January. In Hoboken, Emily Drewby, Currents News.
Great news for the U.S. economy. Hundreds of thousands of new jobs have been added in December. The surge is much higher than the experts expected. Karen Kafa breaks it down for us from Washington.
The Labor Department's monthly jobs numbers delivering good news for President Trump.
This really took people by surprise. This is a great number.
The U.S. economy created 312,000 jobs in December, rounding out 2.6 million jobs added in 2018. Unemployment at 3.9%, a slight uptick over the last update, but the result of more Americans getting into the labor force. The report beating expectations and tamping down recession fears amid recent market volatility.
There is no recession around the corner. Growth is slowing, and that'll become more obvious as we make our way through 2019, but I don't think recession is likely, and that's the message in this report.
The ongoing trade dispute with China has dragged on U.S. and global markets, and investors have been wary of the Fed's plan for more interest rate hikes. On Friday, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, noting the strengths in the U.S. economy like the jobs market, said the Fed will remain flexible.
So markets are expressing concerns, again, about global growth in particular. I think that's becoming the main focus, and trade negotiations, which are related to that. And I'll just say that we're listening carefully to that.
380,000 furloughed government workers were not factored into the report. The numbers were collected before the partial government shutdown began. A shutdown that continues could show up in the numbers released next month. In Washington, Karen Kafa, Currents News.
Tonight, the Vatican is confirming that a bishop holding a top job at the Holy See is being investigated on allegations of sexual abuse. Bishop Gustavo Zanchetto was tapped by Pope Francis to take a newly created position at the Vatican's Office of Financial Administration. The move came after Zanchetto quit his post as a bishop in Argentina, allegedly for health reasons. Pending the investigation's result, the Vatican is saying the Argentinian will abstain from his new work. Father Pat Conroy is staying on as chaplain in the House of Representatives. He resigned from the position last April, claiming then Speaker Paul Ryan pressured him to leave because he's Catholic. The priest later rescinded his resignation. Ryan has denied the charge. Lawmakers approved Father Conroy in a voice vote on Thursday. Today, round 2 of the Shutdown Showdown between President Trump and congressional Democrats. A new meeting of both sides at the White House this afternoon to find a solution and get thousands of federal employees back to work. Omar Jimenez reports the results.
2 full weeks shut down. That's what the government is facing as the partial shutdown carries into its 14th day.
Open up the government and let's continue the discussions.
Congressional leaders were once again at the White House Friday in the Situation Room, trying to reach a compromise on the government's situation.
How do you define progress in a meeting? When you have better understanding of each other's position, when you eliminate some possibilities. If that's a judgment, then we made some progress.
We're all on the same path in terms of wanting to get government open.
But the president has been insistent on securing additional funding for a border wall.
This is national security we're talking about. We're not playing games. We have to do it.
Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has insisted he will not allow a vote in the Senate until there is a compromise the president endorses.
They know that a solution will need to be palatable to House Democrats and Senate Republicans alike. They know that making laws takes a presidential signature. We all learned that in grade school.
All the while, hundreds of thousands of government employees are working without pay over a period that included the holidays. This shutdown is now the 4th longest in United States history. In Washington, Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
More than 2,000 migrant families are being freed into the United States. They're being released from custody by the Department of Homeland Security. Officials cite a lack of detention space. The border-crossing adults and children from Mexico are getting court dates for immigration hearings. The adults will be required to wear ankle monitors. Her cries were heard around the world. 7 months ago, a young migrant girl was separated from her family at the border and pleaded with immigration officials to stay with her mom. Now she lives in Houston, where life looks very different. Gary Tuckman has that report.
7-year-old Alison Jimena Madrid enjoying the day at the Children's Museum of Houston.
Are you happy today? ¿Tú eres feliz hoy?
Sí, muy feliz. Sí, mamá, de verdad.
A very different story from when she and her mother first came to this country. And now, almost 6 months later, they're getting ready for their first asylum hearing, the start of a process which will determine whether or not they can stay in the U.S. As they've waited for the hearing, Alison Jimena has been going to a public school in Houston. When she arrived in the U.S., she did not speak a word of English.
Okay, let's hear in English.
Why I love America. I love my school. I love my church. I love to smile. I love and believe in the American dream.
Her mother, Cindy, is doing her best to learn English at her church. She cannot legally get a job at this stage of the asylum process, but says she wants to work. She says she would like to have a job cleaning or at a restaurant or whatever job she can get, as long as she can do it with dignity. So what is the likelihood that daughter and mother will be granted asylum? Their lawyer says she is hopeful, but
there's a good chance that it may not be granted.
Attorney Garcia says Cindy Madrid left to protect Alison, her only child, from gang violence. The gang, she says, they wanted to steal me. The attorney says if Cindy Madrid loses her case and is sent back to El Salvador, that is not an overstatement.
Could be death. They had very serious problems with gang violence. They had no protection by the police as well.
Alison Jimena says Houston is now her home.
It is a sunny day when friends stick together. The finish. Okay.
But this legal battle is far from finished. Gary Tuckman, Houston.
Breaking news from Washington tonight. The Al-Qaeda mastermind behind the attack on the USS Cole is reportedly dead. The U.S. Navy ship was hit by suicide bombers in October 2000. 17 American sailors died when a small boat loaded with explosives detonated while the coal was docked in Yemen. The terrorist responsible, Jamil al-Badwawi, is believed to have been killed in a U.S. airstrike Tuesday, also in Yemen. There's a lot more news headed your way. National Migration Week begins on Sunday. Bishop DiMarzio joins us in moments to talk about it in his weekly Into the Deep segment. Sunday is also Three Kings Day, the Epiphany, and a Brooklyn bakery is working around the clock to prepare special treats. A bus driver who's now being called a hero. What he did that saved dozens of lives. Do you have a story idea? Is something happening in your parish we should know about? We want to hear from you. Keep this email handy, newstips@thesalesmedia.org. Email us. We'll be right back. Catholics around the world, but particularly in Mexico and here in the Diocese of Immigrants, will celebrate the Feast of the Epiphany with a special bread. It's part of a pastry tradition that dates back centuries. Currents News' Tim Harfman is standing by at a family-owned and operated bakery in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, where they're preparing the loaves. Tim.
Michelle, this bakery is preparing pastries by the thousands. It's called Rosca de Reyes, and it's not your ordinary loaf of bread. These Brooklyn bakers are working non-stop to turn yeast into a feast.
It's a really family gathering.
It's for the Epiphany, or Three Kings Day. Miguel Lopez runs Don Paco Lopez Bakery in Sunset Park, a sweet shop that's been making these oval-shaped pastries since the early 1990s. They're called Rosca de Reyes, or Three Kings bread. And this isn't your basic loaf of bread.
Where should I hide my baby Jesus?
That's right. There are several tiny statues of the Christ child hiding inside each loaf.
It represents a tradition when Joseph and Mary hide the baby Jesus from the King Herod.
If you cut the bread and find a figure in your slice, you're in charge of another fiesta.
You have to throw a party on February 2nd. Why February 2nd? Because we believe that is when Mary, Joseph present baby Jesus to the church.
The tradition dates back to 14th century France and was eventually picked up in Mexico. Each loaf takes about 4 hours to make.
We actually begin around 3, 4 in the morning, and it goes all the way until 8, 9 p.m. because people demand it.
There's such a demand, over 3,000 loaves are baked at the bakery's Sunset Park and Manhattan locations. The tradition is so popular, other communities, not only Mexicans, are buying the bread.
They want to bring this tradition to their children, to their families, even though they are not Mexicans, because this tradition has been well taken by other communities, and we welcome that.
And coincidentally, I cut a piece of the cake and I found a baby Jesus, so it looks like I'll be throwing a party for the Currents News team. In Sunset Park, Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News. Michelle, back to you.
All right, Tim, I'm looking forward to lunch on you. See you soon. Sunday also marks the start of a week that's especially important to Bishop DiMarzio. He discusses what will be happening with Ed Wilkinson in tonight's Into the Deep segment.
In the United States, next week we celebrate National Migration Week, which is a celebration of the U.S. bishops. And Bishop, this is a topic I know that's near and dear to your heart. And this year the theme is building communities of welcome. Well, right now we don't seem to have a very welcoming spirit in this country to migrants.
No.
How can we build communities of welcome and welcome strangers among us?
I think one of the things that's important is for people individually to look back on their own history in this country. People are here 2, 3, 4 generations, some longer. Most people, it's 2, 3 generations, not that far, not that long that their grandparents, great-grandparents came to this country. And reflect back on that, because then you realize the necessity of welcome. The necessity of new people added to the United States. You know, what has made the U.S. great is immigration. If we didn't have immigration, and forced immigration, unfortunately with the slaves coming, and the other immigrants coming, we wouldn't be the nation we are. The diversity, the strength, the intelligence, all of that is important. So we need to reflect back on our history as a nation of immigrants, built by immigrants, and recognize that the new immigrants can add to the country. Now, all the other issues, it's complicated, the things of people trying to come without documents, looking for asylum. All of these things are human problems that need to be addressed one at a time. But you can't just lump it together and say, no one's welcome. Put a sign up. We're finished with immigration in the United States.
Does a country have a right to control how many people come into it?
Definitely. There's no question about that. The church has always said that, except that it's also balanced by the fact of how many people can you take care of. You know, is there a reason why you're limiting immigration? So it's a balancing act.
Is everybody, you know, who is against welcoming everybody into this country, I mean, doesn't necessarily mean they're anti-immigration. I mean, some people just are afraid of being overwhelmed by this issue.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is we're not overwhelmed. The percentage of immigrants is at kind of a high right now, but historically it's been higher. So we're not. I don't think we have to be afraid of turning the tide of the nation so that we're forgetting our American roots. This is historically a pattern. There's ups and downs in migration for different reasons. So, but never should it be based on any racism, any fear of the stranger. That would be the wrong motivation.
We've seen these caravans of people coming from Central America and through Mexico, and along the way they've received help from groups, particularly the church and parishes. And is there anything that parishes here in the United States, particularly in our diocese, can do to make a more welcoming spirit for immigrants?
Well, we're not on the border, so we're not meeting people the same way just coming, but there are ways of supporting the work of the church in the migration office that we have, and the welcoming through all of the ethnic apostolates we have. It's in the individual parishes where people come to worship that they should feel welcome, that they should not feel estranged. So it's an attitude more than so much of a action is important. Attitude and then action follows, but the attitude needs to be one of welcome.
We're known as the Diocese of Immigrants. What does that mean to you?
Well, because this diocese has been the port of entry for immigrants over time, since beginning of the city of New York. Brooklyn has always been, and Queens, the borough where the immigrants went first and moved on to other places. So that's what it means.
Thank you, Bishop DiMarzio and Ed, for that important discussion. A few weeks ago, a destructive earthquake rumbled through Anchorage, Alaska. Many are still picking up the pieces, but for one church, there's still millions of dollars in damages left to go. St. Andrew's Catholic Church is hesitant to even begin their rebuilding process because cracks continue to grow with every aftershock. But Father Arthur Roverath has been with the church for over 3 years, and he says the parish is resilient.
I think it's all going to come together. I honestly haven't lost sleep one night over this because I know it's going to be fine. My faith is in God, and I'm confident that it's going to be put together the way that He wants.
Within the next few months, the church will hire contractors to begin repairing the damage using funds collected by the community. A driver in Tennessee is being called a hero after he evacuated dozens of passengers from his bus when it caught on fire.
Get out! Get out now! The bus is on fire!
Smoke billowed from the back of this Gray Line passenger bus. That's when the driver, Lonnie McGee, pulled over and immediately moved everyone off. Thanks to Lonnie, no passengers suffered any injuries. Still to come on Currents News, a new idea on how to greet the new year. A Christian pastor has written a book about proposing something different, and it's catching on. I'll talk with him about it. And it's the world's largest show of its kind, a spectacular city made of ice. We'll be right back. New Year Year, new you. Thousands of Americans are kicking off 2019 by setting resolutions. A Christian pastor from North Carolina is proposing something different, though, and it's catching on. Mike Ashcraft says it has to do with a single word, and he's even written a book about it. He joins me now. Mike, tell us about your book. It's all about choosing one word instead of making a resolution.
That's exactly right. I wrote the book, it's interesting enough, about one word, and it took 50,000 words to write it, because it's about a process and not just a promise. Most of the time when people, especially this time of year, we start to make our New Year's resolutions, and our New Year's resolutions are all about the things that we wish were different about our lives. And we typically make promises to ourselves not to do what we've always done, or that we promise will be different than we used to be. And you know what happens by the first few days, certainly the first few months, we have broken those promises. And the real problem is what it does to us. We start to believe that we're just not cut out to be that kind of person. We sort of give up on ourselves and just resort back to what we've always done and who we've always been. And so the book really embraces a process by which we focus, and it provides us with a lens through which we see our lives, and not just a series of promises that we're making to ourselves to be better.
Right. I mean, I'm a victim of that. Go to the gym every day, and then it's already, I haven't gone at all. So what's your word for 2019?
So my word for 2019 is behold. As I thought about it, it felt aggressive and it felt forward. And I was researching the word and learned that when God came to Abram in a vision, the word that was used in the Hebrew really is closely related, or gets translated or inferred in the English language, as the word behold. So it was a revelation, but it also comes from fixing our eyes on something and then responding to what we fix our eyes on. So it wasn't just about vision to be attained or some hill that I'm supposed to charge, but it was about slowing down and responding to what it is that I see, to behold God and who He is, and really allow that to drive all of my responses in what I do and how I proceed this year.
Okay, so we just want to give you some numbers. According to Forbes, even though more than 40% of Americans make resolutions, only 8% of them actually achieve them. That's what you were just talking about. In your experience, is this new way of looking at a New Year's resolution even more effective? Will I get it done if I choose one word?
You know what, people say that all the time. It is unbelievably effective. And what the beauty of picking a word is, it becomes a lens through which you see everything else. And then it allows that sense of integrity, that sense of wholeness. It also allows us, or keeps us from breaking promises. It allows us to see our failures and our struggles as a part of the process by which we become the kind of people we hope to become, and more importantly, the kind of people that God has created us to become.
All right, so I have to focus and I have to pick one word, and I'll let you know what that is. All right, Mike, thank you so very much, and have a happy New Year and good luck.
Thanks, you too. Thank you for having me.
The world-famous Louvre Museum is saying 2018 was a historic year. Over 10 million people visited the Louvre last year. That beats the museum's previous record set in 2012. Visitors are returning to the City of Lights after terror attacks in 2015. More than 1 million visitors are also heading to China to see Ice City, the world's largest ice show. The sculptures, which include elaborate cathedrals and palaces, are more than 30 feet high. The festival will be open until February, when temperatures warm up. That is Currents News. I'm Michelle Powers. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.